Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon, except when it's summer. So this
You're telling us we're lazy buggers.
no, we just selective, and we all know that we all need a break. So that's what we've done, and we're back from the summer break, and it is now the fall. And just in case you're wondering who we are listed on mondaylive.org. And also, most important is just to note that the views expressed here on this call are personal, not of any company or organization. Do post questions and comments on the Zoom chat so we can make this as interactive as possible. And if you want any of the links that's posted on this slide deck, you can also see the slide deck on mondaylive.org right there on the homepage. So the theme for September, for the 3 weeks we have in September, is the changing landscape. And the panelists were earlier joking around, is this about the landscape around the building? No, it's about the landscape of the industry and finance and everything else. So hopefully this will be a good conversation this month. So our agenda, a bit of news and trends, just chit chat with between us, and then in the changing landscape, we're focusing on the changing indoor environment today. In other words, what's happening with buildings and our use of buildings, both on a financial and social and work and everything else perspective. So that's our focus for today. Hopefully have some interesting discussions around that. But before we do that, I'm going to pass it over to Ken. What's going on?
Thanks, Anto. Yeah, the changing landscape is a good introduction to what's going on in our lives. Of course, it's our 25th year of running automated buildings, and I've been in the industry for 50 years. It's becoming clear that the next 50 years is going to be a lot tougher on these. So I'm trying to make some reconfiguration to turn this over to a industry-driven magazine, or basically resource, I guess is a better framing. We started about a year ago, and pleased with our reinvention pilot project. We're going to announce at AHR our anniversary celebration, and we're going to basically talk how we see reconfiguring automated buildings so it can be proliferated for as long as people want to proliferate it, by the industry, for the industry. So that's our exciting news. Then AHR Chicago is a natural place for us to do that, because we've been with AHR Expo for 25 years. We started in Dallas in 2000, was our first show that we did with AHR. The only thing is that because Chicago was canceled that 1 year for COVID, this is actually our 24th year of presentation for AHR, but it's our actual 25th year. So that's good. So we're hard at generating our education sessions. They're shaping up well. I'm kind of excited. Some new people on the scene, so that's always good. The theme is evolving to creating new skill sets for staffing for AI, cloud, and decarbonization. As we kind of move into these new areas, we need to think about who is going to actually make all of that happen. We're starting to see a lot of what we've been talking about on Monday Live starting to come to fruition. Basically, the cloud native concept is being picked up. It's an interesting, in talking to some early adopters of cloud native, in the early days they couldn't mention cloud because it wasn't trusted, and so they had to cloud assist and cloud this and cloud that. They couldn't actually tell people that they had everything, all of their assets were in the cloud. They couldn't actually say that because the people didn't feel comfortable. But all of a sudden, in the last few years, and with some of the discussions we've been having, cloud native has become accepted. And so we're going to have a session on that, which I think will be a really good one. I'm sure there'll be a lot of chatter at the summit, Smarter Summit. And maybe Anto can tell us a little bit more about that. I see that if I go to this AHR site, last year's is still there, but nothing, no dates and times and hard facts on this year's. So back to you, Anto.
Yeah, just on that point, on the Smarter Summit, we do plan to hold the Smarter Summit again on the Sunday prior to the start of AHR Expo. I don't know exactly what the date is. I think it's January 21st, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a Sunday.
That's correct.
Sunday. Yeah. And it'll be the same time. It starts at 3 p.m. in the afternoon and it runs until 6. And then we have a reception until 7. So same format. It is in a room that we've been provided by AHR Expo. And the room is actually in the convention center itself, not too far a walk from the exhibit floor for those who are setting up on that Sunday. But more information will be available in the coming few weeks. But that's the plan for that.
Just a little bit to add to that too is I do want to just send a kudos from our industry to ASHRAE and to AHR, just the support that they provide, the fact that they provide these free meeting rooms, the venue for us all to basically promote what it is we're doing, or basically even just educate. It's a better thing. The support of BACnet, cybersecurity, Lawnmark, BACnet, all of these things that are just part of what they do is huge. And being involved with them for 25 years has just been amazing. So I think we all got to acknowledge what they're doing. And what I'm really pleased is Smarter Summit as a new outreach was well accepted. And in some of the discussions I had with Kim, some of the other things, she's very supportive of the industry. What do we need to do to keep the industry going? So good news.
Good.
Congratulations, Ken, 25 years.
Sorry?
So congratulations, 25 years.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm the last man standing. You guys told me to turn it over to my people, and I didn't really have all that many people, so I've gathered up the kids, and they're going to be kind of in an administrative editorial board advisory, but really my people are the industry. So that's what we need to do is to shift the control of automated buildings. And I'm very pleased to do that, to keep it going. It's been
so you're telling us you're the father of many.
Let's move on, shall we?
my illegitimate kids. Thanks a lot.
All right, so moving on. Thank you, Ken. Moving on. Oops. I think this is Bill.
Yeah, it's Bill. Before this, Ken, it's interesting what you said about cloud. I'm wondering if we're going to get to a point, or we may already be there, that unless you're in the cloud, it's going to seem insecure or not ticked and tied or untidy. Like if somebody says, yeah, we're on-prem, people are going to go, ooh, like what? You got a server rack somewhere? I wonder if we're going to get there, or maybe we're already there. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. And Mark's got a great article on Edge on the site here as well. And that's another thing we're seeing evolving is the cloud on the edge. Is if your product doesn't come with a connection to the cloud, then we're kind of questioning it. We can't watch it. We don't know where it is. We don't even know where it is before it gets installed. Which is so many benefits.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And it wasn't that long ago, Anto, when we're like, nobody's going to go to the cloud. It's so fun. It's so fun. Anyway, in keeping with our theme to create context for what's ahead of us in Monday Live over the next few months, kind of speaking of the obvious, where in the world are people back to the office? It was interesting to note here that the United States still has how would I say this? The most days off, the most remote working days of these main 10 areas around the globe. And of course, city density and size and cultural norms are affecting all that. But this slide is strictly to enhance the context of as we go into the fall months and what we've been talking about and so forth. So, Anto, nothing more there than just that.
Okay, thank you.
And just leave it up for a second, I think, because it does talk to our the notes are interesting.
Yeah, I like the Japan one of the fax machine.
Mm-hmm.
I read that first and I thought, is this whole thing a farce?
Mm-hmm.
But
Nice, interesting,
right.
Bill.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Moving on, I had a couple of things, and I think this is kind of the way I'm looking at what's going on, and it goes to the changing landscape conversation today, is that obviously those that don't know PIMCO is a big investment firm, huge. They operate all sorts of in many different industries, but they are they wrote this big piece, and they're basically saying, hold steady. The long term is going to be fine. There are different ways that you can think about what's going to happen in real estate. So they're really sort of taking a let's say, more calm view of what's going on, and recognizing some of the let's say office Armageddon stuff that's going on. So it's an interesting read to just sort of compare the different sort of asset classes, the way they're sort of thinking about that. So I thought that was an interesting article, and sort of contrasting that, which is the other side of it, which is the very human aspect of it, specifically to do with the job market. And here, I've never heard of Mondo.com, but kind of an interesting article that's sort of just looking at the differences in how boomers and millennials and Zoomers, never heard that until today, which is the Gen Zs, how they're looking at the job market and looking at getting work, especially since a lot of things are changing, as listed here on this bullet point, everything from digital, the revolution, everything's now online, the remote work, the global aspect, et cetera, all the way down to AI. It's just how that is sort of changing the way people are thinking about work, which obviously is fundamental to things like office and a lot of other things that we as a society do. So I thought this was sort of contrasting, was quite interesting.
Yeah, Anto, the human aspect, here we're all tech people and all that. The human aspect is the aspect to focus on for sure. Something interesting that I listened to today, there's a book that's out about Zoomers, Gen Z, how they're also not joining the military. Like, they have no use for the military. And, we're 25, 30% behind on recruitment. So they've talked about military jobs. Are we going to have to make them more like the public sector where, I don't know, if you're the best machine gunner, do you get a little extra pay or something like that? Just like some interesting new concepts to make the military less World War II-y. And by the way, I watched Midway this weekend. Mark, you'll appreciate it. I watched old Midway this weekend, but make the military less World War II-y and more attuned with Zoomers.
So a lot of lessons coming out from the Ukraine-Russian war in that area, Bill. The sort of the use of technology, drones, how that is dramatically changing the landscape of how. That's why there's a lot of eyes on that war at the moment, because people are taking a close look at what the folks from Ukraine, very, very smart people. I mean, that's where a lot of software development is happening, and these guys are taking all that skills and knowledge now and applying it to simple things like homemade drones to drop grenades in tanks and stuff. So changing the landscape as a result. To your point.
Well, that's been one of the change in the military, even though that things are recruitment is down. There was a time there, if you look back, let's say 8 to 10 years ago, the recruitment marketing and or advertising was the soldier in the field getting muddy, so forth and so on. Then they knew recruitment really went down. So they changed it and focused in on the technology and the high tech, sitting in a bunker somewhere in the United States, flying a drone and dropping a bomb or whatever the case is. recruitment soared. And, you know, so I think this is just a matter of things are catching up a little bit, I think, with them. But their whole emphasis, to your point, Anno, is on the technology aspect of the armed forces, not the old guy, the man or woman, you know, in the field, you know, that type of thing. So
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. So I think there was one. Yeah, there's this one. Rick.
Yeah. So the coalition is going to be focused on trying to expand the community over the next few months going into AHR through these office hours that we're going to try and successfully have over the next few months before AHR. We're going to focus again on some specific areas of how different individuals and companies can sort of join the movement of what we're calling interoperability and you know, an alternative to proprietary architectures. We're going to demonstrate, answer questions, talk about specific things that we're going to be trying to showcase at AHR, talk about specific ways that, again, people can become involved and move their company or their individual talents to this more interoperable alternative than what's been available in the market before. So that was a little bit of a mouthful to say, please join us on the office hours, the first Thursday of each month. We may have an interim one because we were not able to get the first one off the ground last week. So we may see a non-scheduled one pop into your inbox. Again, the intent is to talk about very specific topics of how your company or your individual talents can become more tangibly attached to what we're trying to advocate for and what we're wanting to be able to demonstrate at AHR.
Cool.
And sorry, Rick, you said you were going to send an invite?
Yes, this
Okay.
the standing meeting of first Thursdays at 11, that is out there for people to register for. But because last week's we ran into a technical difficulty, we may put one on the try and get an invite out for either late this week or early next week as a
Makeup.
session.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. By the way, I love the sign that's behind you. That for those that are not familiar with it, that was the sign that a lot of people signed at the last Smarter Summit in Atlanta. So
Yeah.
just with the slogan there of Smarter Together. So thank you, Rick. Community link board. If you want any of the links, as I said, this is on mondaylive.org. Before we move on, any other thoughts that anybody want to bring up? Hearing none, let us proceed to the changing landscape. And we've obviously been doing a lot of really interesting topics prior to the summer. Surfaced a lot of things, including cloud native, which is really the essence of how we're moving to the cloud, is to actually make everything cloud native, which means that everything is inherently able to be in the cloud, right? So it's not really necessarily being in the cloud, it's being cloud native, which means that you can be in the cloud. And that's obviously where the concept of the IBB comes in, because IBB is really a cloud that's actually on-prem. So by being cloud native, you have this sort of enormous flexibility that comes with the cloud technology. So we talked about a lot of things, and we thought that after the summer, really want to focus the remaining months of this year on just sort of organizing ourselves, organizing the industry, leading the way, trying to sort of figure out what the specific things we need to do, all leading up to AHR in January. At the Smarter Summit, which is obviously something that is put together as a collaboration between Monday Live and the coalition. So we're really sort of thinking that the landscape is changing here, and we're not talking about just the pure landscape, obviously, of the land. We're really talking about three things over the next 3 weeks, and this is how we're actually going to split it up. The first, for the rest of this hour, is really talking about how the indoor environment is changing from what it was, let's say, 5 years ago, from COVID, from health, from climate decarbonization, and from technology. You know, how everything's changing, as well as sort of the financial sort of aspects of it. And then next week we'll talk about how the sort of the human element that sort of presents itself as an experience. We all have experiences, how we have expectations as experiences today. So how that's changing how we think of something like buildings and the built environment. And then the last week of this week, we're going to be talking about technology, which obviously I don't need to say too much about the fact that that's all changing as well. So that's how we're going to structure this this month, starting with the changing indoor environment this week. So that's the agenda. I don't have any other slides, so I'm going to stop my share. Probably should start the sort of the changing indoor environment landscape, talking about the sort of the big elephant in the room, which is the office Armageddon, and just getting back to work and all that kind of stuff, but specifically from a financial perspective. And I'm going to call on David to speak to this. He actually was a guest a couple of months back, touching on some of these. But David, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. I'm going to share my screen because I did put some slides together here. Okay. So first of all, I know we have the disclaimers at the beginning, but just a few. These are strong opinions, very loosely held. So I can be swayed easily, but please share any anecdotes or interrupt me at any time if anyone wants to contribute along the way. I'm making a ton of gross generalizations. Of course, there are exceptions. Please share any examples. And the intent of this is to engage our clients thoughtfully and to understand where clients are coming from, the building owners, the owner occupiers, the asset managers and asset holders. And then ultimately what we want to do is uncover opportunities for all of us to pursue, keeping all of the above in mind. So with that stated, we're in an extraordinarily challenging real estate environment compared to anything that has ever happened historically. But at most of these large junctures like 2008, you can say that same thing. But this one is different in a few unique ways. As we all know, office occupancy and office use is down. What's interesting, though, is typically with most buildings, if it goes below 10% vacant or above 10% vacancy, the building's losing money. And sometimes it has to be 85% occupied, 90% occupied, in some cases, maybe 80%. But as soon as it goes below that, the building's not making money. And when you look at the current vacancy rate in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and a lot of other major cities, with the exception, of course, Miami, everything else, the occupancy rates are near 20% or over 20%. So what's happening is asset holders, the consortium that typically owns these buildings, whether they're institutional investors or private general partners representing a JV or whatever, they're handing the keys back to the bank because in many cases they've already made money. They've held the property for a while and they're just going to cut their losses and walk away. And the banks do not want to take possession, and they also want to avoid the valuations dropping to some extreme amounts. The other thing is this has huge property tax implications. I hope everyone's heard of a doom loop by now, but this is when the occupancy goes down in the offices, the collected taxes go down, the cities can't provide the services that they provide, and it just is a downward spiral. And cities like San Francisco are really in a situation where this could become a reality. Then there's been a lot of talk about flight quality, though this is our always been happening, but brokers especially like to use the term so they can make deals getting you to move to a nicer property. But in a lot of cases, fewer people are coming to the office, so they don't need as many square feet, and they need more collaboration space instead of open office. And so this means more money can be poured in per square foot for a nicer place with a nicer location, perhaps, or a better view, or what other nice quality could make the space better than the ones they're in already. A lot of the time, tenants are moving to higher floors in the same building even. Then there's this amenities war going on. And this is really apparent in the Class A spaces. I've toured a lot of these buildings in Chicago over the last year. Sears Tower, they spent almost $1 billion adding on a multi-floor mixed-use space to the tower, and then adding amenities floors throughout the tower itself. And you're seeing everything you can think of: golf simulators, grilling stations, screening rooms. And what's interesting is amenities that used to apply to, say, luxury apartments now absolutely apply to office. There's been basically a complete convergence in terms of all those amenities. Class A is doing well. It's Class B and C that's in real trouble. And Columbia University did one study that's estimating New York real estate is going to lose 40% of its value over the next 3 years. That is a huge amount of money, billions and billions of dollars. And there's a lot of Class A buildings, of course, in New York. There's a lot of B and C on the numbered street horizontally that have very little light and not necessarily nice space. And a lot of people are wondering, what's going to happen to that space and those buildings. So one of my favorite terms that I learned from the retail Armageddon that happened, starting a decade ago, is that office is basically now under demolished. There's an oversupply, and the tenant improvements and free rent and concessions are growing. And another term that's going around a lot is extend and pretend. Instead of devaluing the asset, writing it off and doing new debt and new loans and everything, what the banks and the owners are doing are extending their current loan for another 2 years or 3 years, hoping the valuations will come back up and everything will be okay. But that's actually what happened 2 years ago during COVID. And what we saw then is a lot of people going, nobody's going to work, let's just extend the loan and we'll figure it out when COVID is over. Now COVID is over and they're having to figure it out, and they're trying to kick the can down the road a little more. And one of the great lines that's also going around is stay alive to 25. So if you can just keep some sort of equilibrium and keep your tenants in your building, or whatever the scenario is, hopefully this will all shake out, and nothing bad will happen. With this in mind, though, from the folks I'm talking to, it's a very challenging situation because one friend in San Francisco, they have between 8,000 and 10,000 residential units. They're liquidating 2,500 units from their portfolio because they can't service the debt. And the valuation in San Francisco, if you look at cap rates, they're going to set a new denominator for cap rates with how low the selling price is going to be. So there's a lot of property that's going to be changing hands, and I'll speak to that, I think, on this next slide. I jumped ahead, though. It's not just office, it's residential and multifamily. They kicked the can or took loans. They're having to refinance now when interest rates are so high. And residential and multifamily is facing a lot of the same challenges that office did, except they have a higher occupancy in their buildings, but they can't refinance, because if they refinance at the current rate, they won't be able to have a profitable asset any longer. And if you add on top of that, the insurance costs that have increased by 25% or more, wherever there are forest fire risks or flooding risks or hurricane risks, all of those force majeure situations, there's a lack of insurance that's available, especially in states like California, Texas, and Florida. Small banks also are facing challenges. They can hold on, but they're out of cash, and they're waiting. A lot of their loans that are out are going to be underwater because of revaluations, and they don't have additional money to lend. So this means there won't be too much new construction either. It's anticipated in the coming years. So the rate of new development and ground up development is going to recede and decline. And the housing problem is not getting fixed. We still have, we don't have enough homes for people, and we don't have enough affordable homes for people. And this is an endemic challenge in pretty much every city in the United States, except for Minneapolis. They changed a lot of their rules, and they haven't seen a spike in rents or anything through the COVID time period. They've also gotten rid of all of the parking requirements and all of the single family home zoning in the entire city. So all three of those factors have really contributed to a very stable economic climate. But then the flip side, I was watching a video on Jackson, Wyoming, and the average house cost there is, I think, $3 million or so.
Jeez.
And sorry.
Nothing. Just
Yeah. And the joke is that the people in town either have 3 homes, meaning they have three homes in different parts of the world, or they have 3 jobs. It's one or the other in the community, and they all have to, commute 40 minutes to work. Okay, so PropTech has also stalled out. As you can imagine, asset holders have way bigger problems, so they're not necessarily spending money on new technology. A lot of the PropTech firms are in the doldrums. They've done a seed round and an A round, and now they're looking to raise their B round, but they don't have the growth to warrant the funding, but they need the funding to stay alive. So it's an interesting challenge for both VC PropTech investors and for PropTech firms. And tenants are waiting until they move. A lot of people are like, hey, we have too much space, but the lease is up in 2 years. Let's try to sublet something for a year, but then we're out of here and we're going to reset the clock, and we don't have to figure this out until next year, and we're just going to move because we're sick of this building anyway. We've been here for 20 years. So a lot of firms are looking to make big changes in the coming 5 years. And then there's a massive exchange of assets that's brewing. And buy low, sell high right now is probably the best time to invest in real estate in the next year, probably in the next 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years. This is a quote from Warren Buffett. When others get greedy, I get scared. When others get scared, I get greedy. This is one of those times. And we're seeing, or at least we're seeing a lot of investors gather together dry powder to try to time the bottom. And we're not at the bottom yet. And I would say we're going to hit bottom in the next 12 months. Okay, so with all of that good news, what are the opportunities? Well, empowering the amenities race. Integrated digital smart buildings really are designed to improve the tenant experience as well as the operations experience. And to have those touchless elevators and point of sale and integrating vending and parking and all of these things together requires smart building consultants. And most asset holders don't know how to do this themselves or are able to do it in-house. And so they need outside help to figure this out. And there's a trend now that portfolios are finally waking up to this and doing updates to all of the buildings in their portfolio. So I think a lot of us know of Quadrille up in Toronto and their efforts to standardize their systems across all of their assets. This is happening with a lot of other organizations. Hines has stepped into the ring with a 15 pilot start to that. And I think we all have some friends involved with that. So there are a lot of examples of now's the time to start investing and looking at this as a portfolio-wide deployment. The other thing is work with owner occupiers. It's a little easier when the owner of the building occupies the building because then they see the direct benefit. A lot of the times, if you have a distance asset management fund like a JP Morgan Chase, they don't really care about the physical building, the operations of it, and those things, and they don't have necessarily a team to care or oversee that or see the value in that uplift. So it's harder to do that when the asset is owned by a fund. If it's owned by a company like Quadrille or something like that, or Hines, they take a little more of an active role in the asset management and they see the investment as being worthwhile. But of course, big firms like Microsoft like to standardize across their entire portfolio, as well as universities and hotels. So there's always opportunities around those areas. The other thing is repositioning Class B to Class A or Class C to Class B. Technology can be, in many cases, the least expensive way to significantly update a building. And so that could be a huge opportunity to go in, put in a building IP network and, you know, all of the stuff we talk about on these calls, and quickly reposition a Class C building to a Class B and put in new fiber at the same time. So there's a chance that updating the building from a technology side is the best way to reposition an asset in a marketplace. And that's all I got. Hope this has been helpful.
That's great, David. Thank you very much. I think that's a great sort of succinct sort of recap of what's going on. Open it up to the group, to the panel, and anybody in the audience to chime in by chat. Any thoughts?
David, I just want to, I think your presentation was terrific. You covered so many salient points, particularly around the challenges. One thought on the challenges that you didn't bring up, the underlying assumption was that the COVID experience is driving building owners to not need the amount of space they've traditionally had. Okay, but what I didn't hear was any mention about the issue of safety in a lot of these cities. So people are moving out or don't even want, even if the space was less expensive and had all the amenities, if they feel coming and going is not to their security of their person or their property, they're not going to want to go back for that reason. So is that not also a challenge, a realistic challenge?
It's tough because I don't want to say all of the news you watch is wrong, but as an example, in Chicago, the crime rate downtown are back to their relatively very low levels. Okay. They've stopped the smash and grab in the big luxury stores and that trend. And overall, the crime rates, like in Chicago, are down, the murder rate's down, but then you have to understand at the same time, a lot of that assault and serious crimes are not happening in the central business district and are not happening in the downtown areas. They're happening in specific suburbs and is tied to gang-related, a tragic gang-related activity. And so, you know, at the conferences I've been going to in Chicago with BizNow and ULI, the asset holders are pissed because there is this sentiment that crime's out of control.
Right.
But if you actually look at the stats, it's not. But, you know, you can't get, you know, Fox and you can't get, you know, CBS and CNN. That, hey, listen, look, we're reporting from downtown. It's great. Everybody's having a great time and it's perfectly safe. Because if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. And I feel like so much of the problem is the misrepresentation of the violence. But of course, there are exceptions. I mean, I've heard like it's junkie heaven in downtown San Francisco. But then, you know, somebody from San Francisco will be like, you don't know that. You're not. And I'm perpetuating the bad news. And so really, I think that so much of it is perception. But in terms of leasing out properties and things like that, I mean, not enough is happening to know whether or not crime is one of those elements. I mean, there are so many other factors happening, but you're correct. It is absolutely a concern and it's a higher concern, but it's a thing I think that doesn't prove out in the data.
Could you also argue, though, David, that the crime rates are down because people aren't going back to downtown?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point too.
There's nobody there.
And it's like it's 30% higher than last year. Well, last year was still 80% lower than 2019. You know, so the numbers are all effed up. And I think the thing that's one of the most interesting things about the numbers being effed up is that selling an asset is based around a lot of the times the cap rate. And the cap rate, the denominator is determined by sales comp, comparative sales. And there have been none. And if there are ones, they're really, really bad. And so it's totally screwed up. No one can tell you what their cap rate is because the sales comps are no longer there. So it's really a confusing and challenging time.
Just to go back to the, you know, I agree with Steve there, David. I mean, great presentation because I think you captured all the salient points that everyone's talking about for sure, and it's imperative to try and get people back to their offices. I kind of take a step backwards and go, well, what was the motivation for people to be working downtown in the first place? And if you go back in time, the reason we used to go downtown to offices downtown, and you go back, you know, multiple decades, is because that's where all the technology was. That's where your fax machines were. That's where your computers were. That's where your telephone system was that let you to do. That's where your receptionist was to take your phone calls. You know, the real motivation of working wasn't as much about meeting people. That was an offshoot of that effect. But the primary reason was because we had all the technology and we didn't have any of that technology at home, right? I didn't have computers. I didn't have fax machines. I didn't have a receptionist. So, you know, it was impossible to do work from home back in the day because just didn't have the tech, and that's what we've done. What COVID did in my mind is kind of reversed that equation, right? It's now said, okay, all the primary driving forces to go back to the office, I actually now have right here in my desk, everything. I have my receptionist, I have my Teams, you know, I have all my technologies, I have all my high-speed stuff. And then, you know, that whole exercise that you brought up about, okay, we have to make the office experience so much better that, you know, that people want to, I don't know that's a thing, you know, and, you know, even for those of you know where I work at, we go through these exercises. We've done a lot of the scenario building that you talk about, and how do you actually, you know, how do you make that environment so compelling? I go, I don't know that that's a thing. I don't know that tenants actually care about whether I have so many recycled trash cans or whether I've got good lighting or whether if I have to compare and contrast that to the fact that I can get out of this chair literally after this meeting and go walk my dog around the neighborhood for half an hour before my next call. No amount of what stuff
Tough
you
to
can
beat.
put in the
Yeah,
building.
tough to beat.
Yeah, no amount of
Yeah.
stuff you put in the building can match that
Yeah.
equation for me, you know.
The
Yeah.
genie's out of the bottle. I don't know if we can get her
Gotta
back
put
in
it
there.
back in. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, what's interesting, The Economist estimated that the minimum amount of technology advancement in the last 2 years was what would normally happen in 10 years.
Right.
And in some countries like Japan, where everything's done on paper still, they saw like a 15% jump because they just couldn't get anything done without opening up to these types of systems or ways of working. And so the technology advancement that did happen was tremendous. What's interesting, though, is that it's the sharing of knowledge and mentoring new and
Yeah.
younger staff and
Yeah.
the establishing the culture. I'd be happy never to go downtown ever again, and I'd be happy not to go into an office probably ever again, or wear a tie for that matter. But the situation is, we, our culture is always evolving and changing, and what we need to do is share what we've learned and share our experience with the rest of the people in our organizations. And what's really interesting is that, when I had a large team at Arup, I would be as hands off as I possibly could, because my motto was, I probably shouldn't say this on a recorded call, but it's only a problem or a mistake if the client finds out. So let's learn wherever we can. And, as long as we can keep the learning in-house and foster the advancement and also do right by the client, we can all grow together and find new solutions together. And that type of stuff is really hard to happen. Even if you're on like an all morning call with a team of 6 people, it's not the same as being in the same room together. And that's the part that I don't think will ever go away. And so this is why I'm quietly talking to friends at JLL and CBRE saying, hey, you should team up with the startup incubators in your town, and on Fridays, allow them to come in and use all your fantastic collaboration space, because then the space is being utilized, and groups that normally wouldn't have a big room with whiteboards on every wall can come in and utilize that stuff. So I think there are some solutions, but the biggest challenge is to be this 3-day-a-week thing or 4-day-a-week, and you're not really utilizing the asset well.
Yeah, our take on it is, to your point, David, our take on it is, it's not a black or white 0 or 1 answer to this thing, right? And so our perspective is, it's a spectrum, it's a dynamic spectrum, and it's going to be different, like you say, region to region, city to city, culture to culture, application to application. Hospitals still need people in the hospital.
Yep.
They still need doctors and nurses. You can't do, but they've also explored it. It might not be 20%, 30%, might be 5%. So we treat it as what we call dynamic, right? It's a dynamic services approach, right? And you have to be dynamic, and that dynamism is also changeable over time. So even if you come up with a solution for a client today, it's probably not going to be exactly the same 2 years from now. It'll change again. So stay on your toes.
Yep.
Another point I'd like to make is the actual folks that were designed to use these buildings are now growing younger finally. And a lot of them have never in their life used a laptop or printed a document. They only grew up in the cloud. They understand, they can't understand what we're talking about. The typical thing I get is, use your phone, old man, and give up. I give up on all that laptop crap. I don't care where the computer is. I'm used to gaming with a bunch of people. I'm used to having a relationship online. So that's a
That's
whole
true, too.
culture that we're bumping into. And we used to just talk to, oh, that's those gaming kids. But those gaming kids are now in our area. So yeah, no, there's radical change on that side, and that's changing our attitude. And lo and behold, they're right. Actually, doing a lot of this stuff with a phone and the cloud is just a whole lot easier than what we've done all our lives. And we just have to buck up and change.
Let me jump on and give you a real life example that happened today. So, as you guys know, I was driving home from San Diego this morning, had a funeral to go to, unfortunately, but my grandson rode back with us today, and my wife started in talking to him about, why didn't you talk with your cousins more? They were all there. Why didn't you spend some face-to-face time? He's like, what do you mean? I see him all the time. and she said, when the last time you saw these guys, they were all 3 feet tall, and that was a decade ago. What are you talking about? And he starts listing off, I'm Instagram friends with this one, and I message and do direct DMs with that one. And he's just going through the list of all the people that he has relationships with that we don't even know about. He's communicating with these cousins all the time, and totally didn't understand what grandma was talking about and why she was so concerned and worried about that, right? So I completely agree. The way that the next generation is looking at relationships is completely different than we did, right? So I think the need to be face-to-face and get some of the very important things that David was talking about culturally, to happen, there's just a different way for that to happen in lots of cases.
I just to echo on that one, Tracy. So one of the weird spin-offs on the other direction, I do notice, because I do a lot of team meetings with my team, right? And my team is all over the global, right? To the point where I actually know them a lot better than if I was in the office with them at any one time, right? Because if I was in the office, I doubt I'd very much have as many team meetings as I would with some of my global guys. But when I do go into the office to have a meeting now with a specific thing, it's actually 10 times more productive than it was in the past. Because in the past, it would be, the 15 minutes worth of catching up and all that sort of crap, and all that stuff's done. I get to the office, we sit down, we nut something out for half an hour, and we move on. Something that might have taken a few hours in the past.
Everybody's anxious to get back home, right?
Probably true too.
And I'll tell you something, in this, we've talked about this in our team on the culture concern, right? So we do a huddle every day, company-wide, different groups get together, and you get this little 2-inch square window into somebody's home. And half the time, it's first thing in the morning, there's kids running by, there's somebody getting ready to go out. You get this little view of family and in their life that you never really had before. And now, the kids, half of the kids of my employees will jump on and wave to everybody in the morning meeting, and everyone said they all know their names and they say hi and so forth, so it's different, but it's happening, right? You're building teams, you're building relationships, you're building a culture, but it's just a different kind of a culture. So, I don't see trust falls in our future, but maybe meeting somebody in real life is the equivalent. IRL is grandma thought she was pretty cool, saying that you had a chance IRL to meet, talk to your cousins. So
interesting. Yeah.
That was a 5-minute laugh from the grandson, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. The social changes is obviously affecting the whole landscape. Jim, Mark, do you have thoughts? Because you probably look at things from a slightly different lens.
I'll what Anno said about whether or not he, seeing the making the offices, the best thing, get my coffee, get whatever, making it a catering to that experience. I still think the jury is out on that. I'm not 100% there yet, in that I'm noticing more corporations now are not going that route, are doing some things, but not that overboard thing with respect to creating that experience that the owners and the operators are looking at their experience. What has changed for me as an owner and how I have to manage and operate this building? And we can go on the whole thing for another time for another discussion. Equally, I'm noticing that we were talking about the cities, that the folks, the businesses that inhabited the cities, yes, are taking less space. We all know that. I think that's something we can all agree. But then they are getting space out in the burbs where they can get the people who live into those spaces the 2 or 3 times a week, which is where I think is going to be the new norm here sometime in the near future, is 3 days a week in the office, 2 out. And we're going to learn to operate that. And finally, this whole thing when you guys were talking about the younger kids and stuff like that, my 8-year-old grandson's the same way. But I will say this, I think part of this also is many of us who are a little bit mature in age, I guess, I like to use that word, in that our whole society has turned into a whole self-service society. We self-serve ourselves every single day. I travel, the airport, I check in by myself. I want a bagel and cream cheese. I order it. It's thrown on a counter. I have to spread the cream cheese myself. I got to pour the coffee myself. Oh, I need money. When's the last time you guys have been in a bank? Oh, ATM or Venmo or whatever, the various things are. So I think we're looking at our buildings as self-service now. So there you go.
I would add on to that. I was thinking about all this. So the space that is coming back, and even I didn't catch everything David said, but I caught some of the tail end. The space that is coming back as shared space, right? We even took over half of our office space and made it part of the warehouse. And now the desks, for the most part, there's a few people that are going in all the time, but they're up for grabs. Whoever's there first grabs a cubicle or a desk. And so you don't have that same sense of belonging or home or permanency there, even with all of that going on, right? So this distributed officing, for lack of a better, what Mark was saying about offices in the burbs, it's like distributed control, right? Jim has he's told us the best example. He's out of the city and out to the burbs.
That's right.
That's happening a lot. Yeah.
Jim, thoughts?
No, just to wrap up, I thought it was an excellent presentation from David. We know that commercial office Armageddon is here. Fortunately, there are a lot of other sectors of buildings that, in terms of public buildings, government buildings, houses of worship, higher education, healthcare, industrial. There are lots of other classes of buildings where people don't have the opportunity to walk away. And I just wanted to lay that on the table, that I'm old school. I like going into the office. It's no longer about me. My staff has voted with their feet, and it's permanent. And I realized that 3 years ago that's the way it was going to go down. And so I'm adapting.
Yeah. Rick, do you want to close this up?
I'm probably on mute, but yeah, I think we need to take everything that we're seeing and kind of figure out how to jump in front of it and show sort of leadership around, everything we've learned over the last 100 years or whatever. Show some leadership on how to put to use that new technology to allow people to do things in different ways in their buildings. what's left of them.
Yeah, some of the chat on kind of interesting about cloud native.
Mhm.
In a way, Tracy, what you were describing, the younger generation at your funeral,
Yeah.
they are cloud native, right?
Totally.
I mean, in the real sense of the word, they are native to the ways of the cloud.
What is the number one punishment for somebody, a teenager or younger?
Take it away.
Don't even go there. Don't
Right.
even go there.
Don't even suggest it.
They'd call 911 if they had their phone back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're in trouble.
All right, let's wrap this. It's been great. Thanks. It's good to be back. Hope everybody has a great rest of September, and we'll convene again next Monday, continuing this changing landscape conversation. So bye all, and we'll put the
Bye
video up tomorrow or Wednesday. Bye-bye.
I know.
Danielle, nice comment.
Yeah, I'm just responding. Yeah.